He said, I'll pay for his abortion, but I won't be in his life. And so my mom originally agreed, and a week or two went by. She said, I just can't do it. And so my mom ended up showing the greatest courage a woman could ever show. Man, no family structure, no economics, no support. And she said, I'm going to give this thing life. I later asked her and I said, Mom, why did you choose to give me life? She said, I did not know if I had the capacity to love, but if I had the capacity, I was going to love you.
You're listening to the Sent Ones podcast, where we help disciples of Jesus discover their calling, develop their skills, and get deployed to their mission. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode on the Sent Ones podcast. We've got Pheaney here, of course, as always, our partner in crime, co-host extraordinaire, editor / everything podcaster. And we have Joshua Brown, my good friends, who is also known as, AKA, pressure washing pastor, which basically means he baptizes with a pressure washer. And so, Joshua, it is so good to have you on here, bro. And it's been so good to get to know you over the last year, man, and can't wait to hear your story. But before we get into that, man, just want to welcome you on and let you know how privileged and honored we are to have you, bro.
Hey, I appreciate you guys giving me an opportunity to share what God has made out of nothing. Made something good, and hope to offer. Yeah, it's the truth. And
yeah,
if we think about it, all we do is have to pause for a moment and remember our whole story. And once we think through our story, we realize God has done great things. Even on our worst days, God has done much with very little. And when I say better than I deserve, I mean every bit of it.
Yeah. My wife says the same thing about me, Josh. So Amen. I get it, bro.
Yeah. It's true too.
No, that's good, bro. Well, hey, let's jump in, man. You have such a powerful testimony, bro. And so I'd love to kind of rewind before we talk about current life and current ministry and what you're up to and all of that. Man, I would love our listeners to get a feel for just your background and your testimony and how you came to Christ. I feel like it's super powerful and would bless our listeners. And so why don't you lay it on us, man?
Yeah, and as our listeners decide whether they're going to bounce out or stick with us, I'd encourage them to stick through the entire content, because my story will be over, and then I'll share a little bit of what I believe God wants to do with people like us. But in 1963, my mom got adopted from Kalamazoo, Michigan, down to Madison, which is the hood of Nashville, Tennessee. It really is the ghetto. She lived on Wade Circle. There was a Hooters on one side and a Waffle House on the other. And you're in the hood when there's Waffle House and Hooters right side by side.
Wings and waffles. That's all you need, Wings and waffles.
And women. And so that's where my mom started at. Some families do an amazing job when they adopt children, and some people should never be approved to adopt a child. And my mom would land in the latter. Her dad would go to prison for things he was doing to her by the time she was 13. And her mom was addicted to pain medication and alcohol. And if you have ever had a loved one that has mixed, pain medications and alcohol, their brain just doesn't work the same. They turn into an entire different human being. But as a child, this is just normal. You don't know what's not right. And I remember my mom said she watched a television show, and then she realized that what was going on with her and her dad wasn't appropriate. It wasn't until she saw something that was like, that's not right. And so long story short, by the time she's 15, she gets pregnant with me from a 21-year-old. She's 15, dude's 21. He's like, baby, I can't get no woman pregnant. And the next thing you know, she says, hey, I'm pregnant. And, when you find out that you're pregnant, the godly thing, the manly thing to do is be like, I'm going to love you. I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to be the best dad on the planet. None of that was said. He said, I'll pay for his abortion, but I won't be in his life. And so my mom originally agreed, and a week or two went by. She said, I just can't do it. So she did the only thing she knew to do, and that's to go to Frankie's mama's house. So she showed up at the door, 15 years old, pregnant, knocks on the door, tells Frankie's mom that, hey, I'm pregnant. And Frankie's mom said, you're a whore, and you did this on purpose to get Frankie locked down. Now, we know 21-year-olds these days, and we know 15-year-olds these days. And the last thing, man, a 15-year-old is not trying to lock down a 21-year-old. And so my mom ended up showing the greatest courage a woman could ever show. Man, no family structure, no economics, no support. And she said, I'm going to give this thing life. I later asked her, and this was maybe 6 or 7 years ago. I'm like 41, 42 at that time. I said, Mom, why did you choose to give me life? She said, I did not know if I had the capacity to love, but if I had the capacity, I was going to love you. That's so powerful. But as a result, everything didn't turn out right. You know, we grew up on the streets, lived in the projects, moved around from town to town, different places. When you're poor and a single mom, you're just looking for the next place to sleep. So we were all over the place. And by the time I'm 17, I'm a drug dealer, pothead, high school dropout in Winston-Salem, North Carolina.
Do you put that on your resume, Josh? When you're yeah.
Yeah, I really do. Like, I've actually written out, we both have a common friend in Todd Wilson, and I've written out like the whole thing, like, you know, being a drug dealer is part of my story, you know, and drug dealers make great pastors. You know, we God can use the least of us, and he proves it.
I have a buddy who said, you know, you go from drug dealer to hope dealer, right?
Yeah, dope, man. Yeah, so I'm following a friend of mine. I'm 19 years old. I'm thugged out. I'm what you would call a wigger. I don't know if y'all know what that means, but you can put two words together and think about it for a few minutes. But that was me. And I'm following a friend of mine named Pookie. He has a 3000 GT Stealth. He's running a yellow light, and I end up running the red light behind him. Well, it was kind of like Dukes of the Hazzard. There was another truck running a red light from the other side, and we ended up meeting in the middle. So a Ford Ranger came through my window. My car spun around, ended up in somebody's front yard. Two wheels pop off. It looks like a banana. I got weed in the car, weed in my system, denied medical attention. And while I'm sitting there, I'm just looking at the cars pass by. And maybe a week or two later, I'm listening to some Tupac Shakur, and it was about a heaven for a G. And I knew enough theology that there was no heaven for the way I was living. And ultimately, this was the words that was in my head. If I would have died in that car wreck, my life was making an impact on nobody. And so that landed me to the last night of a Wesleyan church. Back in the day, there used to be these revivals that took place for 7 days. You would always pray and invite people like me to show up, and then be shocked if they actually got up and walked to the front. And so I was there. I had my girlfriend with me, and I just sensed God speaking to me. Have no clue what the pastor was saying, but God was speaking to me the whole time. And, you know, probably he could have said, hey, you're a loser, you're going to hell, you're worthless, all of it true. But he said, I love you. And that was like, I need love. And so as soon as the guy opened up the altars, I ran forward, didn't run. I walked forward, gave the pastor my pot and God my heart, and went back to school, got a GED, pastoral ministries degree, Christian counseling, got married, ended up having 6 kids, 22 years of pastoral experience. And that is about 6 years, now 8 years ago, I got a little burnout on growing a local ecclesia, or the local kingdom. Now, if anyone's listening, I'm not suggesting anything's wrong with the local church. We need the local church. I love being a part of the local church, but it felt like I was running more programs and events than making disciples. And that frustrated me. As a dude who radically come to know Jesus, left everything, found treasure, and sought Jesus with everything in my life. And day in, day out, programs, events, small groups, and just the cycle for me was broken. And so I did what anybody would do with a pastoral ministry degree, Christian counseling. I Googled top 5 businesses I could open for $5,000 or less. And I could have started cleaning chimneys, taking pictures of cats, or pressure washing. And I look back and wish I started taking pictures of cats, because it would have been a whole lot easier for sure. But ended up working with a friend of mine for a half a day. In 4 hours, he made more money legally than I had ever seen. It was $800. I was like, bro, you're rich. I had to work Uber, Lyft, Papa John's all week long, 60, 70 hours to see $800 cash. Went back, built a small trailer, grabbed my Honda Odyssey van, threw some stickers on the windows, and we got a Brown's pressure washing rolling. While full-time on staff, year one, 2017, did 225,000. Then next year, 443. Next year, 783. Next year, 900 and change. And now that it takes me to 2020. And what happened was I found so much satisfaction in praying with people that I met at the streets, sharing my testimony at what's called lunch and learns or property managers. I found so much fulfillment on being a minister in the marketplace. And I didn't have that language at that time, but it was like, man, I don't want to go back. I love people, but I don't want to go back to running programs. I'm tired of being the youth pastor. I didn't want to run games and programs and events. I wanted to be and make disciples. And then my team, I got to pay my volunteers. I didn't have to request them to come and serve and run, little programs and make them, anyway, long story short, I got to pay my volunteers, and then I got to disciple the volunteers, and then I got to send the volunteers out into the marketplace to serve people, to pray with them. And it was like, this feels like church. And at that time, I'm reading books on missionology. I'm reading books on business as mission, or there's missional communities. And it's like, I didn't need to go start something else. I had already organically started something, but it wasn't intentional. It was completely organic. And within about 2 years, I felt like God just say in prayer on the ground in my garage, where that's kind of my silent prayer closet, do for others what I've done for you. And so I don't know if you want me to stop, talk about the pressure washing business, or move forward, but I felt like God said for me, call ministers into the marketplace. If I were to go back in my story, when I went forward, I did not need to go get a pastoral ministries degree. I needed to be discipled and then be sent on mission to be a disciple. But back then, they didn't have really, at my church, they didn't have context for business as mission or being a minister in the marketplace. It's like, if you love Jesus, you need to go become a pastor. And it's like, I so wish the story could have been, I'm thankful for the story, but now it's like, man, why don't we see people getting saved and then send them to be missionaries inside the marketplace in whatever industry God calls them to?
Man, what a great story, Josh. So much of it we could jump in on, but I love just even where you were going. That it really fits what we're talking about right now is in season 2 about how we develop ourselves as we talk about being sent ones, but obviously it would apply to developing others. Like, that doesn't need to happen. There's no scriptural mandate that happens inside a Bible college or a seminary, right? There's lots of different ways that can look, and it sounds like you've learned some great lessons. So however you want to take us, you could jump right into some of what you've learned there about how you just help someone develop. I just love hearing how you're like training people and sending them out to go do it. Or maybe it's the next stage of how you've called people in full-time ministry to be in full-time ministry, but have a job through a job. So whatever you want to go, but I just would love to start to kind of tease into that.
Yeah, when I read the book of Acts, I've spent about the last month in the book of Acts. And when you go through it, it's like, we're reading about something that has happened rather than living that something inside of the space that we're actually in. And instead of spending hours and hours studying it, why not live it? And I'm going to pause intentionally, because if you think about it, we really are supposed to be living out like that portion of Acts. Like, we should be seeing the miracles. We should be seeing the shipwrecks. We should be seeing the healings and God moving and telling us and sending us all over the place. It's like we make seminaries and degrees off the book of Acts, but really it's a historical account of what the Holy Spirit did. Why should there not be an Acts of the apostles, the disciples, the prophets, the evangelists, the shepherds, and the teachers today? And I think that's what happens is once we get inside of seminary, not throwing seminary underneath the school, underneath the bus, but it's like we're just supposed to be filling up on the Holy Spirit and then being sent ourselves wherever we go into the marketplace to make the disciples. There's no break between the sacred and the secular. It's all one. I did not know this when I was in ministry. And what I've learned is when you're institutionalized, you think like the institution. It's not until you break outside of the institution that your brain is like, what in the world have I been thinking and saying? I was the youth pastor that would call students up on Wednesday night if they did not show up to youth group and they ended up choosing baseball practice instead. I would be talking to the parents, the grandparents. Where's your commitment at? You committed to church, you committed to your sports games. Why didn't I think different? Like they could be sent there to disciple where they're at instead of trying to hoard them inside of the local ecclesia for your programming. Why don't we train them and send them out to be the ministers in the marketplace, to create the stories that we saw in Acts? You can't recreate the stories in Acts without leaving the church. And so for me, it's a mind shift of perspective that we have to encourage other people to think about. And so if you're listening to this podcast, I would encourage you, share it, comment, like. It helps the algorithm. And we really need to change the way we think about discipleship and about ministry, in my opinion. And when I was at Exponential 3 years ago, I went around to all the booths to get to know different individuals. And this one guy at one table who's a vendor there, I end up sharing with him what I'm doing. I'm the only booth that says ministry in the marketplace just makes sense. And it's a pressure washing thing. I was voted the most interesting booth at Exponential because it was outside of the box. It wasn't weird for those that were in the mission field. They would come to me and say, hey, in our country, all pastors support themselves through a side hustle. All the other guys were like, yeah, I don't understand this. If you're not selling curriculum or a lighting package for a display that you're traveling, you're not a minister or shouldn't belong in this vendor. But while I'm chatting with this one dude, I share with him that I'm teaching and calling ministers to go out and be ministers in the marketplace through starting businesses that create jobs, make disciples, and serve the city. And this is what that dude said. I believe that ordinary people in the pews can do that, but not pastors. You know what he was selling? Seminary degrees. And I'm like, whatever you're teaching inside of your seminary, it should be universally taught throughout cultures and throughout all times. At the end of the day, if what you're selling isn't universal by time and culture, what you're doing is maybe limited to only a certain small group of people, which could actually hinder, which goes back to Martin Luther's point of the demonization of, do y'all know where I'm going with this? Of ordination. And I was ordained in the Nazarene church, but he basically said that we should not ordain because it would make the ordinary or people in the pulpit, people in the pew separated from the people in the pulpit. And then there would be a priesthood division, not a priesthood of believers, which is problematic in what we see in westernized countries like ourselves as far as what does discipleship look like.
Yeah, and Joshua, you're hitting on so many points that we've hit on all throughout the Sent Ones podcast. The priesthood of all believers, man, is not only a biblical principle, but it is a principle of disciple making movements and church planting movements all over the world. Like if we're going to see cities and nations saturated with the gospel, we have to reclaim the priesthood of all believers, equip and deploy them out in order to allow them to impact their sphere of society with the gospel. So whether they're doctors or lawyers or pressure washers or mechanics or teachers or whatever, they've got to be disciples who make disciples wherever they live, work, and play. Like that's what we've got to reclaim that and really blow that trumpet and wave that flag if we're going to see the Great Commission completed in our lifetime. And so what the message that you're shouting and the message that you're really championing, Joshua, is key to see the Great Commission completed. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I'm willing to go anywhere you want to go, but I was looking at the Gospels, and we all love the story of the feeding of the 5,000. I mean, it's an absolute banana story where you've got at the previous chapters, you've got John the Baptist who gets his head chopped off while he's in prison, and you've got discipleship taking place, being sent by two. If you go through all four Gospels, and then you've got this great miracle of the feeding of the 5,000. And then one of the four Gospels, it's only one carries it. I think it was in Mark. It carries that there was a lad there, and he had 5 loaves and 2 fish. It's the only one that captured it. It's almost like the other narratives didn't see or didn't know or find it worth adding to the story. But it's like this little lad come and brought 5 loaves, 2 fish. Without somebody bringing something, the multiplication of something never would have taken place. And so in many ways, I feel like that little lad, whether you want to listen or not, there's something here that you can multiply inside of your city. And it might be small, but Jesus can do big things with small commitments. And so when we talk about pressure washing, you're talking about a home service business that's inexpensive to start up, that can be inside of so many different cities, that can end up creating jobs, making disciples, and serving the city. And if any home service business can really create that as their metrics of what success would look like. And if you own a business or know someone that owns a business, why not challenge them that they're not the CEO of the business, that God should be the one that has ownership of that business. And if he owns your business, what would he want to do with it? It's not your experiences. It's not your power. It's not how much money you make. It's the difference in impact that you make while you're still here on planet Earth, because there's going to come a time that we're no longer here. And the only thing that really matters is the difference that we made for the kingdom of God. And so that's why we're talking about what it means to be sent ones as business owners on planet Earth.
Yeah, and Joshua, what is so important with what you're saying is I feel like the traditional pathway, for example, for a lot of sent ones out there or church planters or whatever, is they feel this special call from God. They then have to go raise tremendous amounts of support in order to support their families and plant a church. Usually that's hundreds of thousands of dollars. And then they have to, they're basically under the gun within 2 to 3 years planting something that then gets enough donations to financially support itself. I mean, that's basically the normal pathway of church planting. What you're saying though is, hey, listen, here is a repeatable um, system where you can literally build a business and make disciples and plant churches at the same time, similar to Paul, through tent making, where you can be co-vocational. You're basically still finding people of peace as you're doing a home service business. You're praying for people, sharing your testimony with people as you're doing work that's supporting your family. But at the same time, you're able to make disciples and plant churches in the process. I mean, that is a beautiful, beautiful pathway, brother. It's a beautiful pathway forward. And you'd think somebody somewhere, like Paul, would have thought of this. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it would almost be now have the ability to live out the book of Acts.
Yeah.
You don't have to read somebody else's story about it. You actually get to experience the story for yourself, and then your team gets to experience the story yourself. And so if you're a business owner and you're listening to this, we need a business as mission coalition. I've been processing this thought. If we had more business leaders come together and think like this, and then invite church planning, disciple making organizations to use our frameworks, our blueprints for how to grow a successful business, and then you bring them in, we train them, and then send them out to plant people inside of cities for the purpose of creating jobs, making disciples, serving the city. It just seems like this is a no-brainer. This is like planting like Paul and discipling the way Jesus made disciples.
Yeah, Joshua, will you unpack that for us, man? Like, I know you and I talked offline about like a residency program that you guys have, and where you're looking for young guys who will come in and you can train and equip them to launch them out. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about what that practically looks like?
So first of all, it's messy. It's like a 2-year-old eating some spaghetti. It is not clean. It is not a perfect plan, but it's messy, and the Bible is messy as well. But this is what I've got. Is 3 months ago now, I had a young man from Clovis, California. I didn't even know where Clovis, California was located until I jumped on a map. He's 17 years old, 36 on the ACT, 2 high school volleyball championships. And he sends me a message on my email. He said, "Hey, I saw your YouTube video on Upflip, and I did not know that you could be a Christian entrepreneur. I thought you had to be either a pastor, and there was no really other option if you're a Christian." He said, "Would you mentor me?" And first of all, I'm like, okay, who's this dude sending me an email? And so I sent him 5 questions that would take thought. He sent a message back within the next day. And the thoughts were like, they were really well thought out. And I'm like, this dude's catfishing me. He is chat GPT this thing and has answered every question because it was so well said. I'm like, this is a joke. And then I did what you guys would do. I said, "Hey, would you be interested in meeting for Zoom?" And so he ends up showing up to Zoom, and he's a real person, family from Thailand, and he is one of 5 other children, and he loves Jesus and just wants to understand what it means to be a Christian and an entrepreneur at the same time. Next thing you know, I'm meeting with his parents, and now he's down here in Nashville learning business as mission in the pressure washing arena. And so it's kind of like dating somebody. You learn what they're good at, what they're not good at, and then you invite them to do life with you, because discipleship is not Bible study. It's actually spending time with somebody and seeing how they behave inside of stressful situations. You don't know who somebody is or how to pick up someone else's behavior until you see them in a moment of stress. That is how we make disciples. Your pastor that you're seeing for an hour on the stage, or maybe his Facebook post, you're not seeing what his discipleship method looks like. You create jobs, bring people in, and a culture inside of your business. You then can create a place where discipleship is normal, and then this is how we behave when bad things happen. This is how we behave when good things. This is what we celebrate. This is what we talk about. It all becomes part of the business as mission culture, and he's here now. And so this is the thought. Every semester, we have a fall and a spring semester here in the pressure washing business, and I basically have created a internship application on pressurewashingpastor.com where you can apply to come down and work for 12 weeks, 2 semesters, and check out what business as mission looks like. And the real goal would be to find individuals or church planting organizations or parents who love Jesus that have kids that they wouldn't mind sending down, and then we send them back to open up their own. For us, it would be a Brown's pressure washing, but we need landscapers and plumbers and electricians and all types of business owners to be thinking how I'm thinking.
That's good. I thought you were going to say they come down and you pay them $12, but I realized you were going for a different 12 there right when I heard that. But love that heart. I think just so good for us to shake that paradigm of like, I feel called to do something for the Lord. Now I got to go. We would even, maybe Josh and I would say, get some good training, right? It's like, well, actually, you can just start following Jesus where you're at. You can do things that are impacting communities for the good, and also develop those skills as you go. I just wanted to ask, maybe as we're getting a little tighter on time, but Joshua, what does it look like when you go out? Just maybe it's a story from this week, but you go out, meet somebody in the community, like just give us a snapshot what it looks like to live on mission like that.
Yeah. So as you grow a business, the people that you meet with are different than the people you were when you started the business. So when I started, I was the guy doing the sales. I was the dude answering the telephone. I was the guy that was washing houses on site. Now I'm meeting with different leaders and different influencers, trying to promote them to do what I'm currently doing. So I have not pressure washed in like 3 years. I have sealed a driveway as needed when they end up saying we need different leadership. But my main goal is to oversee the leadership and the vision of the company. And so shepherds shepherd sheep, but they can also develop sheep to be shepherds. And so now I have a leadership team, and the majority of my time and energy is cultivating them to think like I think inside of different situations. And hopefully I'm trying to think more like Jesus. And so I spend my time with what I would call disciple makers of our organization that's now discipling other individuals. Because if I'm the only person that's influencing the team, I'm not multiplying leaders. I'm now the bottleneck. And so we've created a a ecosystem of developing leaders, putting them in position, and then they end up doing the discipling. And so when it comes to the stories, man, I miss the time that I'm on the street and get to pray with people and share stories of faith. Now it's doing that with other business owners. It's doing with other community leaders. It's constantly talking about what it looks like to be a business on a mission. And so if I were to tell you, like from a practical standpoint, I have other individuals from businesses call me up and they might say, hey, can you help me with some business advice? And I say, hey, I will. But before I do that, is there anything I can pray for you about? That simple thing sounds simple and like not a big difference, but literally, like I'm looking at you right now, people cry when you take the time to stop and pray over them. And I have like 3 or 4 stories over the last month of me just stopping and praying with somebody that's right in front of them. Today, if I were to give a real story, Tristan sent me a message and said, hey, Josh, I've got 2 months here before I go back to Clovis, California. What do you want 2 of my top goals to be? And what I did was I said, hey, I was thinking about you this morning, and I think what you need to do is go to Josh Lee, who is his general manager, and you need to ask him those questions. I know that sounds like not a big deal, but instead of me being the person that's meeting the needs, the person that's working with him the most is going to be the person that's closest to him to see what he needs to work on. And I already know what he works on because Josh Lee and I chat, and he needs to work on his grit. He's a kid that's used to spending about 15 to 20 hours a week reading his Bible and all day Saturday in his bedroom. So the dude is 3,000 years beyond. And this is what I told him. You're 3,000 years beyond the average kids at your age. You need to work your workout muscles as what it looks like to work hard inside the marketplace. I want you to go to Josh and say, what do I need to work on? Because you don't know what you have until you have them inside of your system. And so when you hear someone say, hey, I want to open up a pressure washing company, or hey, I want to be a minister in the marketplace, great, come here, let's assess you for real, find out what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, and try to strengthen what you're weak at in order for you to really be efficient in the marketplace. Because running a home service business is not just about your head, it's also about your hands and your habits. And those are some of the things we have to get into with Tristan, if that makes any sense.
Totally. That's awesome.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, no, that was awesome, bro. I wish we could keep going, man. We're almost out of time here. If somebody wants to reach out to you, Joshua, what's the best way for them to get in touch?
Yeah, Joshua at pressurewashingpastor.com. I invite anybody to just drop me an email. If you're looking to find more information about interning or opening a pressure washing company in your location, we have a webinar that you can register for free. It's at pressurewashingpastor.com. Just click a few buttons, and next thing you know, you'll be on a webinar. I am someone that's creative and thinking, and my hands are open. They're not closed. It's God, what do you want to do with these loaves and this bread? And so if any organization that plants churches or plants leaders who makes disciples, come on. I need some organizations that really want to impact the city through a small business. I've got the framework. We've opened up multiple locations already, and we're looking to open up many more over the next several years.
Awesome. No, that's great, Joshua. Thank you. And for those of you listening right now, I know some of you out there, man, your heart is burning as you're listening to Joshua talk. You long to see the book of Acts lived out. You long to be a part of that. I know there's been so many moments in my life, man, where I'm so tired of hearing other people's stories. I want to have my own. I'm so tired of reading about what used to happen. I want to see what God's doing right now and be a part of something that God is doing right now. And if that's you, man, reach out to us. Reach out to Joshua at pressurewashingpastor.com, if I could say that out loud. Joshua at pressurewashingpastor.com. There we go. Got it that time. Or reach out to us at sentones.com. We would love to come alongside of you and help you truly live out the book of Acts. We want to help you be a disciple who makes disciples. We want to help you find your calling, develop that calling, and then be deployed to your mission. And if there's any way, guys, that we can help you do that, we would love to serve you and see the kingdom multiplied in your area. And so definitely check us out, subscribe, like, all the good stuff on social media. You know what to do. But until next time, Pheaney, am I missing anything?
Oh, that's great, man. Thanks so much for your story, Joshua, and really enjoyed hearing from you.
Thank you guys for inviting me here. I feel like I maybe talk too much, so I appreciate you guys letting me be here.
Everyone's bored with hearing from us, so this is great. This is exactly what we wanted.
We needed you to talk, Joshua. Way to go, bro. Way to
awesome.
Way to be the microphone, the mouthpiece.
I'm just trying to make it easy for you.
That's good.
Awesome. Thanks, bro. Hey, guys, thanks for listening to the Sent Ones podcast. For practical next steps or more content like this, check us out at sentones.com, or you can subscribe with your favorite podcast provider. Hope to see you guys next time.